Good evening. Good evening. Okay. On behalf of the Sisters of Charity of Seton Hill and Seton Hill University, it is my honor to welcome you to the 2025 Mary Schmidt Lecture. The Sister Mary Schmidt Lecture is a collaboration between the Sisters of Charity and Seton Hill University. Established in 2007 to honor Sister Mary Schmidt, who served the university in many capacities, including as president, the lecture series aims to support Seton Hill's Catholic identity, engage the Sisters of Charity and Seton Hill University in learning and dialogue on timely topics on social and environmental justice with global impact. This year and going forward, the Sister Mary Schmidt Lecture will be held as the culminating event of our Founders Day, which has been extraordinary. Seton Hill established Founders Day last year in 2024 to honor and celebrate the Sisters of Charity of Seton Hill, who under the leadership of Mother Aloysia Lowe came to Greensburg in 1882 to establish a new community, new ministries, and new schools that would eventually lead to a founding of a four-year institution in 1918. More than 100 years later, Seton Hill has grown into a coeducational university that continues to educate students in the legacy of the Sisters of Charity. This year's theme, Honoring Our Founders, Embracing Our Future, Responding to the Cries of the Poor, has focused on the ways the Sisters of Charity, through their various missions, have assisted those from under-resourced communities, and how Seton Hill faculty, staff, and students continue to do that work today. The day has been filled with activity, from the opening prayer and presentations on Sister Cyril Aaron, to the amazing academic presentations, to the panel discussion that delved into issues around immigration, healthcare, and education. All of this led us to this evening lecture by Reverend Dennis Holtschneider, CM, who will speak on the topic, Viewing Poverty Through the Lens of Setonian Vincentian Charism. I've been privileged to know Father Dennis for more than 2 decades. When I was 12 was when we met. And he was 13, so beginning during our service to DePaul University. I was privileged to serve as Vice President for Institutional Advancement there prior to coming to Seton Hill. Father Dennis has been a good friend to Seton Hill and to the Sisters of Charity over the years and has provided valuable counsel to both the university and the congregation. So it was incredibly fitting for us to invite him here this evening. Father Dennis is a Vincentian priest and currently serves as the Joseph Cardinal Bernardin Fellow of Church Leadership at Catholic Theological Union in Chicago. He's the co-founder of the Institute of Global Homelessness, the preeminent organization working on street homelessness in the world, and the primary advisor to the United Nations on the subject. Father Dennis has spent all of his 36 years of priesthood working in the church's social ministries, including his years as president of DePaul University, chair and COO of Ascension, the nation's largest Catholic health system, and president of the Association of Catholic Colleges and Universities, the professional association for all Catholic universities in the United States. A frequent writer and lecturer, he teaches at Boston University's Institute for Administrators in Catholic Higher Education and in Harvard University's new seminar for new presidents. I want to thank Father Dennis for being with us on this Founders Day, especially for offering tonight's lecture and for celebrating that beautiful Mass this afternoon in St. Joseph's Chapel. Please join me in welcoming Father Dennis.
Thanks, Mary. Good evening. Oh, that was better than church. Nice to be with all of you this evening. It's more than nice. It's a pleasure, and I'm happy to be back here. I've stopped counting how many times I've been to your campus now, which is a lovely place to be in. You do amazing and actually holy work here at the university, and I've known your president, as you said, for a couple years. I've known the sisters the longest, and I have enormous respect for all that they've quietly and steadily done all these years for the world. You see, I'm a cousin of theirs. I'm a Vincentian priest, a member of the Congregation of the Mission that was founded by St. Vincent de Paul 400 years ago this past January. And a saint for whom Elizabeth Ann Seton had enormous admiration 200 years later. And with them, we are together part of this Vincentian family of people who kind of do lifelong service for the world, especially for those most in need. Like the students who are in the room tonight, I also went to a university that was very similar to this one, filled with concern for making a difference in the world, especially for those who are poor. But that's not how I came to know the Setonian Vincentian mission and spirit. No, I first learned about St. Vincent from my grandfather, John Holtschneider. From my earliest years, I remember the stories that he would tell. He was a member of the St. Vincent de Paul Society, the lay arm of the same tradition we're talking about. He joined his parish conference and became active soon after he retired, in his case, from Westinghouse. Here in the Pittsburgh area, my family lived in Monroeville and Turtle Creek. He and my grandmother moved to Florida, however, and they started a new life in their retirement. She volunteered extensively in her own way, but my grandpa, he joined Vincent de Paul. He never called it society, he just called it Vincent de Paul, for 22 years of his senior life until his health turned poor in the final 2 years of his life. But it was the stories, not the years of service, that captured my imagination. I was 4 years old in 1966, so I had the advantage of hearing his stories from him all the way into my adulthood as he did this. Now, you may know that members of the St. Vincent de Paul Society visit the homes of the poor within their parishes generally, always 2 by 2, never alone, and they meet the people they're trying to help personally. They inquire about their situations and their needs, and then they provide whatever help they can. Furniture, food, rent, clothing, so much more. And almost always starting with a phone call from the pastor who would send them, at least in his case, often adding the visit to the poor that day into an already scheduled day, and they just shifted things around to accommodate it. Those interruptions are something that I learned for myself along the way, too. 43 years ago, when the Vincentians were first introducing me to the poor at Niagara University, young, somewhere between idealistic and naive, sheltered in the ways that a suburban childhood creates, certainly inexperienced, I suppose I wasn't all that different in that regard from the very first sisters that Elizabeth Ann invited to work with her, or that St. Vincent de Paul Society's earliest members when Frederick Ozanam and his friends started that organization. More on that in a minute. The Vincentian Fathers invited me and several of my college classmates to work at a local men's shelter named Maranatha House. It was part of the Catholic Worker Program in that city. The first Friday night, I learned to do intakes as people arrived between the appointed hour of 5 to 6 p.m., at which point the door was closed and locked for the evening. And I learned how to assign beds. I learned how to insist on showers before dinner. I learned to make coffee in the largest urn I had ever seen. And I learned how to make mac and cheese using a block of government cheese. But most importantly, I began to learn the men's names of the homeless in our city. 43 years later, I've forgotten all of the names, of course, except one, Giulio. Giulio was born and raised in Niagara Falls, New York, where the college was. He was probably only in his early 50s at that point, but the street had aged him beyond his years. Summer or winter, he always wore the same black men's raincoat, just layering it with additional clothes as the temperatures dropped. He knew the city. He knew its streets because he had been living on those streets for years. He knew every church and what days and what times each church offered meals, food, clothing, or beds. Now, Giulio was not a chatty person. Once he entered the shelter, he usually just kept to himself quietly, unless he wanted something. Then Giulio was relentless, not loud, just relentless. He had heard the word no all of his life, and he had come to believe that it simply meant not yet. He knew how to wear people down to get what he wanted and what he was focused on, and he was really good at it. Now, we had been warned as student volunteers by the Maranatha House staff never to reveal our actual addresses to anyone at the shelter. But one of our classmates didn't listen and walked Giulio to our dormitory on 6th Street one morning. The next morning, when we woke up, there was Giulio standing outside. I don't remember what he wanted, maybe it was just coffee, but my classmate gave it to him to make the awkward moment go away, and of course, that was the beginning of our journey with Giulio. From that point on, Giulio added our address to the list of places that he visited every day. Now, when our classmates tried to tell him to go elsewhere, he just started ringing the doorbell until he got something from us. And the worst was the morning that we all had agreed in advance not to answer the doorbell. Giulio, the person that we thought as insistent but quiet, started yelling for one of my classmates by name from the street. You had to admire the tenacity, but frankly, you had to admire the lungs. That man smoked 2 packs a day, but he could wake up the neighborhood with those lungs when he wanted to. Now, I don't actually know the story of why he stopped showing up at our door one day. We still saw him at the shelter on Fridays and on the street all around town. Maybe it was the priest who ran Maranatha House that had a word with him quietly, I don't know. But God bless Giulio. I'm absolutely sure that he's with God now, because I doubt that St. Peter could keep the door closed when faced with Giulio's insistence. But I learned a valuable lesson from him, and not the lesson you think about being cautious about giving out my home address. No, it was an early lesson about working for the poor and the ways that you get interrupted. You see, I had volunteered my whole life. As a Boy Scout, we did communities projects. Our Catholic grade school made artwork for the elderly and would visit them in nursing homes. In our high school, there was a young man near us who was quadriplegic and required volunteers daily to manipulate his arms and legs to keep his muscle structure live and loose. But all of those were scheduled projects. We added them into our, quote, regular life as we had the room to accommodate them. There's another step along the path of working for the poor, though, and that's interruption. Several years ago, I was asked to leave higher education, where I was at DePaul very happily for many years, and to work full-time for a Catholic health system named Vincentian. Now, the Daughters of Charity, another cousin to all of us in the Vincentian family, had invited me onto Ascension's board many years earlier. But in 2017, the CEO asked me to leave the board and to join the leadership team. Now, I had run large, complex organizations, but nothing on this scale. It was fun to have a new challenge in my mid-50s. So I dove in, flying all over the United States to get to know all of our major markets, because Ascension Health is in 24 different states, as well as the numerous subsidiary companies that comprised what was then the largest nonprofit health system in the United States. Most of the day, I'd be speaking about strategy and P&Ls, profit loss sheets, and things like government policy and health outcomes and community benefit. But what I hadn't expected was that the experience would change the way that I looked at God. Whenever I arrived in a new market, my first visit, the market leader would tour me through the major hospitals and the clinics and the surgery centers, et cetera, in that region. And I loved those tours because I could pump the leaders with questions about their operations and their major competitors and trends and challenges, et cetera. I learned as much from those tours as I did from reading the briefing materials that I'd been sent in advance. In every single case, when I visited a new market, I always asked about the poor and how the needs of the poor were being addressed by the ministry and how they were affecting the ministry. And then the stories would come pouring out. The barrage of poor people using emergency rooms for the conditions that could have been treated far more easily, simply, inexpensively, if they had only had access to medical care when they first had the symptoms. The broad array of serious medical conditions that came from lack of access to good nutrition in urban desert areas, from poor and even dangerous housing situations, and of course, from living on the street. The devastating burden of uncompensated care on the operations of hospitals that were barely financially surviving themselves, caring for millions of hidden poor who just couldn't pay for the medical care they or their children needed and which the hospital provided regardless of their ability to pay. Now, these administrators were not hardened pencil pushers. They were beautiful human beings who went into healthcare because they wanted to care for people in their most vulnerable moments. They had good hearts. All of them had good hearts, every single one. They wouldn't turn the poor away, but they were overwhelmed and not sure what to do when the poor just showed up at their doors. And that's when I started seeing things in the Gospels that I had never noticed before. Do you remember when Jesus was teaching and a woman snuck up behind and touched his cloak, hoping that the mere touch would cure her? It did. And Jesus immediately felt a new power had gone out from him and swirled around to face her. And I started thinking about all those people that we were healing every day in our hospitals, because they too showed up at our doors uninvited and unexpected and unable to pay, but determined to claim some help in their moment of need all the same. And then I saw Jesus' double response. First, an all too human reactive response, who touched me? And then, seeing her trembling, his quick pivot to say something that calmed her. Your faith has healed you. He not only calmed her, but he gave her dignity. The first reaction treated her like a thief who had stolen something. The second reaction said, you were right to seek that, and treated her with all the dignity of one person encountering another. It wiped away any hint of thievery or lack of entitlement. And that startled interruption in his day was followed by care. Do you remember when Jesus was teaching inside a house and friends cared so deeply for a paralytic man that they cut open the roof of the house where he was teaching, and they lowered him down to where Jesus was. Now, I don't know what trouble it was to fix that roof fully afterwards. But this wasn't just an interruption of Jesus' present activity. This was property damage. And who knows who got hit by falling debris as they cut through that roof. Today, the homeowner would probably be in small claims court to recover the damages. But for those friends who were seeking help for their friend, it was a demand. Stop everything else you're doing and do something for him. Now, the story leads up to Jesus' decision on how to react in that moment. He chose to ignore the damage and the drama and to assist the need. In a moment of need, addressing the need came first. Let me repeat that. In a moment of need, addressing the need came first. Judgment was set aside for later. Do you remember the time that the official came and said, "Please come to my house, my daughter is dying"? Others came and said, "Don't bother the rabbi, your daughter has died." But Jesus went anyway. He took her hand, he brought her to life. Now this was a panicked parent pleading to Jesus, "Please, please, stop what you're doing, and please follow me home." It reminded me of my grandfather and his retired friends visiting the homes of those in need. It reminded me, too, of Frederick Ozanam. He was the college student, your age, many of you, who, with Sister Rosalie Rondeau, a daughter of Charity, went to visit the homes of the poor in Paris and eventually founded the Society of St. Vincent de Paul, the one that my grandfather belonged to hundreds of years later. Frederick Ozanam's first visit to the poor as a college student was with his friend Auguste, also at the University of Paris. They took a poor man some wood. Now, that was no small gift in Paris in the winter, and soon Frederick convinced 6 of his friends to help as well, and they began also taking poor people bread and wood and food vouchers. And Sister Rosalie provided the list of people needing assistance where they could be found, and then they went to visit and help. And that was the start of the Worldwide Society of St. Vincent de Paul, college students helping the poor. Now, stories tell of Frederick and his friends climbing up the stairs to garret attic rooms where the poor were to be found hidden in the winters of Paris. That wasn't a surprise, as the poorly heated, drafty attic rooms would be the cheapest and the most affordable option available to the poor. What was a surprise was that Frederick was doing it at all. Frederick's father had been a medical doctor who cared for the poor himself and often walked those stairs all the way up to the attics to care for the poor himself as a doctor. For years, Frederick, his son, had begged his father to be careful on those ill-lit and poorly constructed stairs and started begging him to stop risking his life on those stairs. And sadly, he was right. His father slipped and fell on those stairs, and dying a few hours later from the concussion. So it was no small thing that Frederick, as a college student, started taking those stairs himself to take wood and food to the poor. He knew the risks. "Let us go to their homes," Frederick said. Jesus in the story said, "Okay, change of plans. It's an interruption in our day, but the official has asked us to go to his home to see his daughter, so let's go to this man's home." It's yet another story of Jesus being interrupted, and we're just getting started. How about the 2 blind men who cried out, "Jesus, Son of David, have pity on us." Remember them? It's one thing to have your time interrupted, but this was a claim for the heart. I think it was Schopenhauer who once said, "All ethics starts with compassion." These two men yelling from the roadside weren't yelling for money or just healing. No, they asked for compassion. Pity, have pity on us, care about us. That's another level of interruption because it's not always easy. We can't care about everyone and everything. It's just too much. It's easier to overlook Gaza or Ukraine or the border or the inner city. It's an annoyance to be asked to care sometimes. Do you remember the time that Jesus tried to escape the crowds by heading north over the border to Tyre and Sidon? And even in that out-of-way place, a local Canaanite woman recognized him and, like Julio yelling outside my front door, started calling for his attention for Jesus to heal her daughter from a demon. In Matthew, this is told as a moment when Jesus' presumed mission to Israel alone is broadened. Here's the text. His disciples came and asked him, "Send her away, for she keeps calling out after us." Jesus said in reply, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But the woman came and did him homage, saying, "Lord, help me." And he said in reply, "It's not right to take the food of the children and throw it to the dogs." And she said, "Please, Lord, even the dogs eat the scraps that fall from the table of their masters." And Jesus said to her in reply, "O woman, great is your faith. Let it be done as you wish." And her daughter was healed from that hour. Now, this is one of those stories where the interruption isn't of time, it isn't of labor, but it's of perception. The disciples were trapped by their own ideas of who was deserving and undeserving of Jesus' ministrations. And Jesus himself gets pushed in that moment to help people beyond the people of Israel. Now, we do that all the time. We think about who's deserving and undeserving among the poor. We have all kinds of ways of thinking about who deserves help and who doesn't deserve help. Sooner or later, though, if you work with the poor, if you get to know their names, we get challenged to see the poor the way God sees them, and God doesn't divide the needy into easy categories. Gwendolyn Brooks, the great famous Chicago poet, the first black author to win the Pulitzer Prize, wrote a devastating, searing poem many years ago called, quote, "The Lovers of the Poor," unquote, in which she spoke of two women from the wealthy suburbs of Glencoe and Lake Forest, north of Chicago, visiting South Side Bronzeville, the poor African-American community, for the first time. And because their charity, quote, guild is giving money to the poor. Here's how that poem continues. The worthy poor, the very, very worthy poor and beautiful, perhaps just not too swarthy, perhaps just not too dirty or dim nor passionate, but it's also bad, and it's entirely too much for them. The stench, the urine, the old smoke, the heavy diapers, all the tumbling children, and the swaggering, seeking youth. Perhaps they can choose another slum, some serious, sooty, but half as unhappy home. For now, they keep their scented bodies in the center of the hall, and they allow their lovely skirts to graze no wall, and they try to avoid inhaling the laden air. Now the poem goes on. The best book I have ever read about government policy to help the poor is called Good Economics for Hard Times. It came out a few years ago. The authors are professors at MIT, and they won the Nobel Prize in Economics for their work. It's two mathematical economists. For them, they have a lot of heart. Their point is that when you study it, most government programs don't work when they treat the poor like they're selfish, lazy, or responsible for their condition. Government interventions that work treat people like the adults that they are, that just want a better life for them and for their kids. Quote, the last thing a worker wants when he's lost his job, they say, is to be treated like those people. But that's one of the interruptions. It's not just our time. It's not just that our work gets interrupted. It's our perception that gets interrupted. At some point, we have to let go of our biases that the poor can be classified into deserving and undeserving. And that was Jesus' point when he cured the Canaanite woman over his own disciples' objections. There is no such thing as undeserving when it comes to God. All that matters is that there are those in need and those who can help. There are so many more stories about Jesus getting interrupted in the Gospels. When he's praying in the synagogue, he gets interrupted. When he's teaching in the synagogue, he gets interrupted. When he's teaching in towns, same thing. When he's trying to get away in a boat to the other side, and they follow him, and they meet him on the other side when he arrives. When children are brought, and the disciples try to push the children away, and the text says Jesus rebuked them and said, let the children come to me. In the evening, quote, when it was evening, after sunset, they brought to him all were ill and possessed by demons. The whole town was gathered at the door, and he cured many who were sick with various diseases and drove out many demons. In the early morning, quote, rising very early before dawn, he left. He went off to a deserted place so he could pray. And Simon and those who were with him pursued him, and on finding him said, everyone's looking for you. On the Sabbath, remember that man in the pool who was lame and couldn't get to the healing waters? Everyone was so mad that Jesus cured someone on the Sabbath. And when he's just walking the road, and blind Bartimaeus calls his name and says, I want to see. At times, the crowds even try to prevent him from leaving. Quote, at daybreak, Jesus left and went to a deserted place, and the crowds went looking for him. And when they came to him, they tried to prevent him from leaving them. But he said to them, to the other towns I must also proclaim the good news of the kingdom of God. For this purpose I have been sent. And yes, even at parties. Remember that wedding at Cana? Now that was his mother doing the interrupting, of course. But it was still a young couple embarrassed by running out of wine, and Jesus saved them the embarrassment. You get the point. I had been a priest for a long time when I was assigned to Catholic health care. But it was then that I started seeing those healing stories differently. So many of them are more than just healing stories. They're interruption stories. Jesus is doing one thing, and then he gets interrupted by human need. And then he has to choose in that moment whether to keep doing what he was doing or stop doing what he was doing. And every time he chooses to stop doing what he was doing and attend to human need. And that's you too. That's anyone who's part of the world of the Sisters of Charity. That's the world you've been invited into, being part of this institution. When you do any act of service, you allow yourself to be interrupted by human need. That's when I realized there is another word for interruption. It's love. But then any of you who have had children, or at least had parents, already know this. Parents know what interruption means, don't they? When a baby wakes up in the middle of the night, you get up. When the baby needs changing, you do it. When your baby's thirsty or hungry, you feed them. Parents know very, very well what it is to be interrupted by human need and to stop what you're doing and to attend to it. And charity is the same. You let yourself be interrupted by human need. That's what love for the poor is, for your fellow human beings. And if you let this work change your perceptions of the poor, it's not only love, it's grace working inside of you. Now, being part of this Setonian Vincentian world has taught me a lot over the years. Giulio first taught me that interruption is part of it. Being Setonian Vincentian means being willing to be interrupted. And when it happens, it's just best to recognize what it is and embrace it. My grandfather first taught me that charity is more than filling in the empty moments of a volunteer's available life when it's convenient. It's willing to be called upon when the need presents itself. I know that the categories of deserving and undeserving, worthy and unworthy don't help. I know that charity is more than bread. It's the manner in which it's given. The charity starts by recognizing the shared humanity between us. And as our sainted founders often taught, I've learned that charity is for our salvation. It's meant to help us grow as human beings. And grace and conversion and purification of our souls, that's never easy. It challenges us. The truth is, we live between worlds of generosity and being annoyed by the demands and the lives of the poor. We live between the worlds of judging our brothers and sisters and realizing that there, but for the grace of God, go I. Do you see what I'm doing in this talk? As we spend our lives trying to be more like St. Elizabeth Ann Seton, or St. Louise de Marillac, or St. Vincent de Paul, or Blessed Frederick Ozanam, it's not enough to copy them. We have to copy the one that they were copying. Elizabeth Ann Seton wasn't telling us to be like Elizabeth Ann Seton. She was telling us to be like Jesus Christ. Here's her words. Jesus, she said, is my guide, is my friend, is my supporter. And with such a guide, what should I fear? With such a friend, should I not be satisfied? And with such a porter, can I fail? My faith, my hope, and my desire are fixed on you alone, she said of Jesus. O Jesus, joy of my soul, give me but a true love of you. Every saint, no matter how different, is just finding their own way of imitating Jesus. And that's the heart of Vincentian and Setonian spirituality. It's getting a good view of Jesus' heart and then making his heart our heart. In this case, what I'm suggesting is that you can get a really good look at Jesus' heart if you look at the choices he made when he was interrupted. That's who he really was. The choices he made when he was interrupted. Those interruption stories tell you a lot about what was most important to him and what was in his heart. There are a lot of other places to learn this, of course. There are lots of novels about the poor, Oliver Twist, Les Miserables, The Jungle. My more recent favorite is Shuggie Bain by Douglas Stewart. It won the Booker Prize for Best Novel in English a few years ago. It's Scottish. It tells the story of a very young boy, Shuggie, who was caring for his alcoholic mother. And like Charles Dickens, the author could only have written this novel because he had known poverty himself. I won't give away the plot, although I'll warn you, it is scandalous. A priest shouldn't be probably recommending it to you. But I will share with you my favorite review of the book, which simply says this: the book is filled with monstrous behavior, but there isn't a single monster in it. I love the book because the author clearly loves poor people. He sees their challenges, their crimes, their cruelty, their self-destructive behaviors, their selfishness, their despair, and he loves them. He loves them because he knows them. He knows how very hard it is for them. No excuses, no romanticized visions of being poor. Like you, however, though, he clearly knows the poor by name, and he's come to love them all the same. It's just like the Jesus who lets himself be interrupted every time he meets human need. And it's like all of you when you volunteer or serve or care for the poor in any way. And that is why I'm so honored to be in a room with each of you tonight. Because you too have let yourself be interrupted by the poor in various ways throughout your life. And you will do so, I'm sure, all the more in the future. So God bless you for all of your interruptions, past and future. The world is a better place because you let yourself be interrupted by human need. The world's a better place because of the love that you introduce into it. The world's a better place because you can find the humanity inside the poor people you meet. And even when you can't see it immediately, you treat them with dignity and care all the same. May God continue to bless your good hearts, and all the good hearts that make up the community of Seton Hill University. May the poor know God's love because they met yours. And like Elizabeth Ann Seton, may you find God because you allowed yourself to be interrupted along the way. Thank you.
If anyone would have any questions for Father, please come forward and state them to him.
This is the Stump the Band portion. Oh, good. I'm really glad I didn't talk you into submission, and you're next.
That's a long walk.
Yeah, it is.
My name is Camille. I'm a junior student. My question for you is, how do we balance protecting our safety whenever we go seek the poor?
So, well, you heard me start off, the Vincent de Paul Society does it by never serving the poor alone, ever. Ever, ever, ever. You're forbidden to go alone. And they mean that for your safety. And they also think it's helpful for two people to be hearing the needs, because you might hear the needs differently than someone else as they're observing. And so it helps to have multiple people in any kind of service. Now, many of our services have many more than two. But absolutely safety first. All of us want you to have a long, long life of serving the poor. And so it's foolish otherwise. So thank you for raising that. Incredibly important. Thank you. Please come forward.
Hello, my name is Jonathan. I'm a sophomore. I was wondering, what was the books you were recommending about the poor at the end?
Say that again?
What was the books that you recommended at the end about the poor?
Oh, about the books. So if you're a novel kind of a person, I recommended Shuggie Bain.
Shuggie Bain?
Shuggie Bain.
Okay.
You'll find it. It was like in all the bookstores. But again, the priest shouldn't probably be recommending it. The book that I thought was the most helpful to me to understand government policy that actually helps the poor and government policy that hurts the poor. Where are we? That's page 8, page 7. There it is. It's called Good Economics for Hard Times.
Okay, thank you.
Good Economics for Hard Times.
Thank you.
Thank you. It looks all over the world to what all different countries do to serve the poor. And it takes examples where it don't work, and then it takes lots of examples where it works beautifully. And many of the examples where it works beautifully are from the United States, interestingly enough. We have learned a number of ways that are incredibly effective, and the book is meant to be read by the whole world as far as here's what works best. But it's fascinating. Most of their publications are all mathematical in their economics journals. This book was their attempt to take a lifetime of what they discovered mathematically and just talk to ordinary people like us about what works and what doesn't. And I found it incredibly helpful. Yes, please come down.
Trying to take longer strides so it's not a long walk. Hello, my name is Ayana. I'm a sophomore here at Seton Hill.
Hi.
And I was wondering, how can, at an individual level, can we combat the narrative that people who are poor are just looking for free handouts or lazy, as you have mentioned before in your speech?
Yeah, boy, is that that's been true forever, right? And people just want to write it off, and then it excuses you from doing anything. For me, it's when I was a student doing service learning, when I was a student working in the shelter at night, and they always got us to work Friday nights, which was a terrible night to be a college student and serving, but my friends and I went out on Thursday and Saturday nights, so we made up for it. What helped was we could tell stories. We could tell, well, I hear that, but actually that's not my experience. And if you volunteered enough, you'll be able to say the same thing when you hear that, because you can say to somebody, well, I hear that, but it's not my experience, and then you can tell a story. And it is almost always more powerful going at it that way than a theoretical argument versus a theoretical argument, which gets you nowhere. So I would go in, when you serve, you know, if you're a journal person, keep little journals of the stories and the people you meet, because it's storytelling you can do the rest of your life. You know, and you change the names so nobody's, person is compromised, but those stories are powerful.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Come on down, as they say, and the price is right.
Thank you so much for your remarks. My name's Sarah. I teach literature here at Seton Hill.
Oh.
And one of the things that you said really struck me, which is how easy it is to turn one's attention away from the poor, from the suffering in Gaza, from the suffering in Ukraine. And I thought about that a minute and realized I maybe had the opposite problem of not being able to look away from some of the suffering that we're seeing right now, which may be just as bad as looking away from it.
Right.
Do you have any advice for somebody who's preoccupied by the news and needs to get started at doing something?
Two answers. One is that I feel the same. I feel overwhelmed. And I've taken to getting my news in the mornings and then shutting down much of my news for a large part of my day. Now, in my life and the work I do, I have to be up on the news. So I have to keep up. But I try to do it in the mornings, and whatever the place in your day is, that's the only thing that's helped me. The other thing is that we are in a situation that generations before us didn't have because of all the social media, all the technology. We can see the world's cries for help in a way that's far more visceral than people could generations ago. And so there's so much of the world crying for help in so many different ways, whether it's, whether it's the climate, whether it's war, whether it's terrible disasters. I think for many people, one thing that can help is to pick one and say, I'll help with that. I can't do it all. I hope other people will help in other ways, but I can help with this one. But not to push it all out. To have some place in your heart where you're trying to make a difference for those in need, and then to do that. That's all I can offer, but it helps me.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Father, I've been retired for about 7 years, and so in my new life, I've tried to do some service work. In some places where you encounter not just the poor, but just people who don't take good care of themselves. Mm-hmm. How do you get over being judgmental?
How do you what?
Get over being judgmental. You try to go in, and you try not to be, and you get better at it. But I'm always finding myself in that position, aside from coming to you in the confessional. Yeah. How did you deal with it? How do you get that out of your system?
Well, I don't know if you get it out of your system or human, right? You start by recognizing it and naming it. First, if you try to idealize the poor, you'll just become cynical because you'll have all the evidence to the contrary. I wish I could remember the name of this book. I read it so many years ago. It was a good 20 years ago. And it was talking about the best research on poverty in the U.S. at the time. And it said, frankly, being poor is half the poor's fault and half has nothing to do with the poor. If you grow up with a poor education in a trailer park and with absent parents and any kind of addictions in the family, you are starting way behind the ball. If you grow up in a suburb with a two-family, well-provisioned family, you are starting way ahead. And so half of the people we see in poverty have, not even half, but half the story of why someone's in poverty is generally circumstances beyond their control. And oftentimes half or more because of choices they make or didn't make at key moments in their life that could have turned their life. And both are true. And if you don't acknowledge that some of this is their mistakes, you're only going to become cynical in the face of the actual evidence that that's the case. And so for each person, it's an individual story. And you know the single largest cause of poverty in America? It's divorce, and it's women. The single largest cause of poverty in America is divorce still. And it's stunning. And so when you start looking at some of this, you go, okay, I need to understand the story. And then I need to understand where people made good calls and didn't. And then you need to go and say, and you know what? In the end, Jesus didn't care. They're in need. I can provide need. I'll help. So it's part of being honest about what you're seeing and truthful about what you're seeing, and then asking yourself if it actually matters and what you could probably do to be helpful.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
We met in the lunch line earlier today. What I'm interested in researching right now is looking at first gens experiences, and when I work with first gens, they seem to have a commonality that they feel the weight of the world on their shoulders. Like they have to be the first one in their family to go to college, and they have to get perfect grades, and they have to get the best job, and they have to be they have to pay all of their bills and make sure they don't miss insurance payments, and they have to do everything right. And a research project that I'm working on is looking at the narrative of imposed virtue on the poor, or perfectionism on the poor. So a story like Charlie in the Chocolate Factory, you had Charlie, who was this poor character, and all of the other characters were full of vice, and they went back to their lives of privilege, but Charlie had to be perfect in order to escape that.
Yeah.
And so I just wonder if you have any insight that might guide my research, and also just working with students that are first gen to help relieve them of that burden of feeling they have to prove, and they have to, like you said, they start so far behind, and they pretty much have to do everything right in order to escape that situation.
Yeah. I'm not quite sure what to do with the research, but I know I would have a research question. My father, who grew up here, was the first one in our entire family to go to college. He went to Penn State main campus. And in fact, in my family, we learned to bow our heads to Nittany lions before Jesus Christ. I know that he was always looked upon by the family as the one who had to make it in some ways, and it was a lot of pressure on him too. So I wonder how much of that is new or not new, but still true and real. I don't know. It'd be an interesting piece as far as your research extends out over time, or how it's changed over time. What I can't do for students who are the first in their families to go to college, and the dynamic that often surrounds that, is make that go away, because it's coming from their family, and I don't have power over their family. But a couple pieces. First, it really, really, really helps when first-gen students find each other, and they do lunch together in the lunchroom, which I saw today when you and I stood in line for Mexican food, which was really good, by the way. There is something about having others who have the same situation as you that helps you go through it. And finding that community matters. Boy, does community matter in life in a million ways, but for them, I think, too. I will tell you this, which doesn't change any of the family dynamics. It's just this is also true. At DePaul, when I would do graduation, we would do 7,000 students for graduation. We would do 7 ceremonies, and I would shake 1,000 hands each ceremony over a weekend. I always got a massage on my shoulder at Monday. But the reason was half for the students, but also for their families, because this is the first person in their family to ever graduate. We couldn't have them simply stand up and sit down. They had to cross the stage. They had to shake the president's hand. It was a big deal for the family to watch their family member cross the stage. And I used to stand on the stage as president and watch the families crying. And it was such a big deal that part of their dream for their family here in the United States had come true in the person of their child in this way. And talk about a pressure, and yet such a powerful moment also. It's kind of amazing. And so I really admire schools that really reach out and make the college experience successful and helpful and doable for people who have those kinds of pressures on them. And yours is one of them. Seton Hill is absolutely one of them. And God bless you all for doing it, because what a difference it makes in the entire life of a family if you can get someone educated. So thank you. Okay, as they say in church, the Mass is ended. Go in peace. Thank you very much.